praises. He told me, oh, all praises. So shalom, y'all. How y'all doing?
Hello.
Shalom, doing well.
No complaints. Yeah, told me, oh, feeling good, feeling great.
All praises.
Yeah, yeah, definitely no complaints at all. We're gonna get into part four. Am I too opinionated? Yeah, and as usual, just keep on peeling it back. So, our good old swordsman, fencer, whatever you want to call him. Uh, Disclaimer: the scriptures expressed in this study are those of the author and not my own. Viewer discretion is advised. In this study, we will look at opinions, how they are formed, and how they can affect our ability to serve Elohim. All right, so Hebrews 4:11. Um, like we always have been going to during this. Let us therefore do our utmost to enter into that rest, lest anyone fall under the same example of disobedience. For the word of Elohim is living and working and sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even to the dividing of being and spirit, and of joints and of marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all are naked and laid bare before the eyes of him with whom is our account. Right. So that's just to say that the fencer he cuts everybody.
Come on.
Like myself included. Like I'm not standing up on the podium and giving these lessons, pointing the finger. Like I got an answer to the fencer too. He cut everybody. So yeah, hopefully the goal is just that these lessons can be used as um, encouragement, just for us to really get on the same page with the Father. So today, the direction of the lesson is really going to be about how do we deal with one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Come on, right on time.
yeah, so opinions, we know a lot of times they, like we have been kind of looking at over the past few weeks, they can be sources for strife, debate, contention, right? All of these things can be centered around just an opinion, and it might not necessarily even be founded, right? We have all sorts of opinions. Everybody has them. So, yeah, now we just gonna kind of try to focus in on that. All right. So, like I said, over the past few lessons, we've looked at biases and opinions. We've gone over how they are formed and how they affect others. Today, we will be looking into this topic a little bit further, and we'll look at how these different biases and opinions can affect our ability to fellowship and have unity with one another. All right. So, again, what is a bias? It says each of us has our own bias, our or inclinations and preferences that influence our judgment and prevent us from being even-handed. Right. So, we know that if it's something that's preventing us from being even-handed, that's going to be a problem because the Father's ways is that we are even-handed, right? So our biases can be conscious, meaning that we are aware when they occur, or unconscious, meaning that they happen outside of our own awareness, right? So the goal, at least with this lesson, is that we can start to get some of those unconscious biases to become conscious. And now that they're conscious and we become aware of them, they might not change overnight, but we can at least make a conscious effort to start to address them, right? So our opinions and biases can unfortunately become points of strife among brethren. Today, we will see how the opinions we hold can put us at odds with one another and cause us to turn from upholding the standard of Torah with those we disagree with. Right. So we will see how different opinions, oftentimes not fully consistent with the scripture itself, causes division and causes us to turn from scripture rather than drawing us to it. Right. So, in other words, that seed can get planted, and then the weightier matters of the Torah that we're supposed to be upholding and keeping with one another, the mercy and all of these things, we can kind of start to put them things on the back burner just based off of how don't you see this the way that I see this, right? So, yeah. So 1 Corinthians 8, verse 2, if anyone thinks that he knows somewhat, he does not yet know as he should know. Proverbs 16:18. Before destruction comes pride, and before a fall, a haughty spirit. Right. So you got the guy at the top. I am right. Yes. And you got, the other dude standing at the altar, and it's just, he just going, not realizing that, the man in the background, maybe his words is having a negative effect or impact on this guy, right? All right, so today there are many opinions regarding this walk, what is appropriate, what is not, what applies, what doesn't, what calendar time we should be keeping, how we keep certain days, and so on and so forth. So while my goal is not to determine which position is right or wrong in any of these cases, I want us to see how our differing opinions can sometimes cause us to have strife with one another instead of reasoning with one another to try to understand one another first, right? So we still may not come to agreement, however, it doesn't give us an excuse for hatred towards one another because we see things differently. In many instances, we meet any differing opinion with aggression in defense of our own opinions. So we can take something as simple as a disagreement in how we understand something. Many times, this thing is less clear than we would like to believe as a personal attack because one doesn't see it how we do. We can sometimes come to conclusions regarding the individual's character, assuming we are correct on the matter, and the only reason they don't see it how we do is because they have wickedness in their heart. It would be naive to say that this is never the case, but today I would like to focus on how we deal with one another during disagreement, especially when over matters that are not pertaining to our salvation. Right. So with this being said, keep in mind how prevalent unconscious biases can be and how they can affect us all, right? So, how many times have we seen, whether it been us, whether we've been a victim of it, or just seen it in passing, where an assumption can be made about another individual's character, and it can kind of be unfounded a little bit. It's really stemmed in just a disagreement, right? Just, no, I don't see that the way you see that, right? And it doesn't necessarily, this doesn't, is not limited to just the scope of the scriptures, right? This is a whole host of things in just life when you're dealing with different individuals from different backgrounds, different walks, right? So, Matthew chapter 5:17. Do not think that I come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to complete. For truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one yod or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heavens. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the reign or kingdom of the heavens. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the kingdom of the heavens, right? And that's the grand prize. So if we ain't trying to get that, then what we doing it for, right? So this is interesting, right? When we look at this in, I don't know if y'all have heard of the Hebrew Matthew, right? So most of the quote unquote translations from the New Testament scripts come from a Greek base, right? But they found uh, manuscripts in Hebrew of Matthew, right? So up to this point, I think uh, 20 22 or something like that, different various manuscripts have been found of the Hebrew version of Matthew. Now, why that's useful is for years, scholars have tried to insinuate that the Greeks were the originals and that the Greeks weren't a translation of a core text, right? Hebrew Matthew kind of it kind of tears that down a little bit because there's certain things that occur within the text that only can exist if there was a Hebrew original. Certain issues with the Greek text that you'll find is like, oh, this can only have happened if the Greek was translated from Aramaic or Hebrew, right? Or and in some cases, you'll see examples where it's like, no, the Greek had to have been translated from the Aramaic, and the Aramaic had to be translated from the Hebrew. This is the only way that this conclusion can, you can only, like, it's the only way that you can come arrive here. So that's a sidebar, right? We're not getting into like a textual study today. And I did want to point out the Hebrew Matthew. For y'all own notes, you can look up Shem Tob's Hebrew Matthew. But this is how it has it in the Hebrew Matthew. So verse 18, it says, "Truly I say to you that until heaven and earth depart, not one letter or dot shall be abolished from the law or the prophets until all be fulfilled." All right, all praises. I think I'm told me yo there.
Okay.
I told
All right. Screen should be popping back up any
Mm-hmm.
minute.
Back in business.
All praises. All right. So Father willing, we're gonna get back into it. Oh, well, that would be the reason why, because I'm clicking the wrong window. That's on me. All
Okay.
praises. All right. So where were we? So yeah, what we were about to do is about to look at Shemtob or Hebrew Matthew, starting at verse 18. Right. So they're in the purple. That's where we're gonna pick up. Right. We just read Matthew 17 through 20. So picking up in Hebrew, Matthew, it says, "Truly I say to you, one letter or dot shall be abolished from the Torah or the prophets, because all will be fulfilled. He who shall transgress one word of these commandments and shall teach others shall be called a vain person in the kingdom of Shamayim, or in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever upholds and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven." So it's a little bit different there. At that time, Yahusha said to his disciples, "Truly I say to you, if your righteousness is not greater than the Pharisees and the sages, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven." Right? So a little bit different there, right? And the traditional, based off of the Greek, right? They say whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven, right? So that kind of frames it like you still get in,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
But there when we look in the Hebrew, Matthew, it says no, that person will be called a vain person in the kingdom. Like, yeah, that's a vain person, you know. And then it kind of makes the second part make more sense. If you just keep in mind, if your righteousness don't exceed the righteousness of these Pharisees, you ain't gonna get in, right?
That part, yeah.
So that leads us to our next question, right? So, well, what is righteousness?
Is it doing it again?
It's not doing it again. It's a window that is just now popping up from startup.
Uh,
But we all right. All I gotta do is just hit no. All right, we told me yo. All praises. So, um, like I was saying, the question is, well, what is righteousness according to the Father's word, right? What's the Father's standard of righteousness, right? So we need to know because obviously the Pharisees think that they have a level of righteousness that they operate in, but that's obviously not making a cut of the Father's standard of righteousness.
mhm.
And then unless our righteousness exceeds their righteousness, then we gonna get the same fate that a lot of them got, right? So, what is righteousness according to the word, right? We got Deuteronomy 6:25, Isaiah 51:7, Isaiah 26:9, right? Psalm 119. We got a couple places that we can look at regarding this. We're gonna look at it on the next slide. But before we get to that, the next question is, well, what was righteousness, or what was the righteousness of the Pharisees, right? So again, we need to know what these two things are.
Yep.
All right. So to be self-righteous, right? This is one of their issues, right? Because obviously, if they have their own level of righteousness, Romans talks about this, that they went sought to establish their own righteousness, not knowing the knowledge of Elohim. We've been over that during the study. Or what was this righteousness, right? If it's not the Father's righteousness, then that means that it's a self-righteousness, right? So having or characterized by certainty, especially an unfounded one, that one is totally correct or morally superior, right? So it sounds a lot like a bias, right?
Mhm.
You saying it like you know it for a fact, but it can be unfounded, right? So means that their righteousness is based off of what? Opinion. It's not based off of fact. So when it comes to the Father's word, however, we know it's all about his righteousness. If in him we move and have our being, wouldn't this mean that our righteousness comes from him? Right. So anytime that we're righteous or we exemplify righteousness, that's not something that we can take credit of in the sense of is it originated with us. Like, no, this is we should be, our told works supposed to be to where when men see it, they give praises to him because they understand, no, this is who this comes from. Right. So Deuteronomy 6:25, and it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all his commands before you who are Elohim, as he has commanded us. Right. So the righteousness of the Pharisees, was they doing it as he commanded, or was they doing it according to some other opinion? So now we're gonna start to see how these opinions can get us in trouble with the Father, right? Especially when we dealing with what belongs to him, his word and his righteousness. So Isaiah 26 verse 9, it says, my being longs for you in the night. Also my spirit within me seeks you earnestly. For when your right rulings are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world shall learn righteousness. Again, not when our right rulings are in the earth, but when his right rulings are in the earth. Right? Isaiah 51:7, listen to me, you who know righteousness, a people in whose heart is my Torah. Right? Do not fear the reproach of men, nor be afraid of their revilings. In Psalm 119, 172, my tongue sings of your word, for all your commands are righteousness. Right? So when we're talking about the Father's standard of righteousness, that means it's going to be something that came from him. Right? All right. So Luke 18, verse 9, it says, this is Mashiach speaking. It says, and he also spoke this parable to some who relied on themselves that they were righteous and looking down on others. Again, keep in mind that self-righteousness. Two men went up to the set apart place to pray, and the one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and began to pray with himself this way: Elohim, I thank you that I am not like the rest of men, swindlers, unrighteous, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I acquire. Now, my side note, were these the weightier matters that he was boasting about? Are those weightier matters? I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I acquire. I'm not saying that they are weightless, right? But are these the weightier? Are these the weightier matters of the Torah? So, like, notice that he's even stamping his stamp on something that is not even one of the weightier matters, while he's neglecting the weightier matters, right? This is what Mashiach was talking about. Yeah, y'all tithe and y'all wear the garments this way and boom, boom, boom. Those things you ought to have done without neglecting the weightier matters, right? So we're not saying that these are not important things. Sure, not one jot nor one tittle, from the least to the greatest. But notice it's something to get his perspective of what he thought was these are the important things, right? And I'm told me, oh, because I'm doing these things, and these are really the things that are not the weightier matters of Torah, right? So, but the tax collector, standing at a distance, would not even raise his eyes to the heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, Elohim, show favor unto me, a sinner. I say to you, this man went down to his house declared right, rather than the other. For everyone who is exalting himself shall be humbled, and he who is humbling himself shall be exalted. All right. So notice how in this case the Pharisee had a skewed opinion of both himself, other men, and the tax collector specifically. So the question would be, who set the standard for his righteousness? Was it the Father, or was it the opinions of himself and others of what the Father said that became his standard of righteousness, right? Somebody somewhere made it to where these things are the things that are the weightier matters and not the others, right? So, yeah, we're going to keep it moving. So a Pharisee, right? A member of an ancient, what they say here, Jewish sect, Yahudi sect, uh, distinguished by strict observance of the traditional and written law. Of the traditional and written is that the written part is debatable, and commonly held to have pretensions to superior sanctity, right? A self-righteous person, a hypocrite, right? So a Pharisee is derived from ancient Greek Phariseos, from Aramaic parisa, plural parisia, meaning set apart, separated. Related to Hebrew parush, plural parshing, the called passive participle of the verb, sources of ritual impurity. Uh, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. Or paras. This may be a reference to their separation from the Gentiles, a particular sources of ritual impurity, or from non-religious Yahudim. Alternatively, it may have a particular political meaning as separatists due to their division from the Sadducee elite, with Yitzhak, Isaac, Levi, or the Levite characterizing the Sadducees and Pharisees as political sects, not religious ones, right? So to sum that up, basically the word Pharisee comes from this idea of this group of people being separate, right? We set apart, we're separated from the rest of everyone else, right? So now notice that Pharisee is a sect within their own people, right? Not all of the Yahudim were Pharisees. So this is even a separation that they're making from their own brethren amongst others and Gentiles, right? So, in other words, you'll see when you start looking at the history of it that these who did not do things this way, Pharisees have an issue with these sorts of individuals. The political part of it is talking about the history of how the group came to be shortly after the time of the Maccabees and all of that, where there's this split between the actual priesthood. Some of them end up leaving, branching off, and going into the Dead Sea Scrolls community. Some of them end up just being the Sadducees, which is Sadducee is these upright ones or these righteous ones, but there's Zadokim, which is literally supposed to be the sons of Zadok, right? So you got these branches, all of these different sects that are going on in this day. The Pharisees end up having like the majority over all of the people, right? So they like the big group over the commoner, right? The layman. So halakha is what they follow, right? And I just, as we going through some of this, I want us to really pay attention to how much some of this can ring bells and be real similar. We can be walking in some of these same patterns, right? If we're not careful, we end up falling into the same scenarios the ones before us, right? So halakha is what they follow, right? These man-made laws, traditions, things like that, right? For them, they're not man-made, but they're man-made, right? Hebrew halakha, right? Also transliterated as halakha, right? They spell it all kinds of different ways. The collective body of Jewish religious laws that are derived from the written and oral Torah, right? So now we're seeing that same thing coming back again, the written and these traditions, right? So halakha is based on biblical commandments or mitzvot, subsequent Talmudic and rabbinic laws, the opinions of their elders, and the customs and traditions which were compiled in the many books such as the Shulchan Aruch. Halakha is often translated as Jewish law, although a more literal translation of it might be the way to behave, or really what it's saying is the way of walking, right? In Hebrew, halach means to walk, to go, right? This is the verb that's used to walk. So the word is derived from the root, which means to behave, also to go or to walk. Halakha not only guides religious practices and beliefs, it also guides numerous aspects of day-to-day life, right? So again, this is what they was calling in their day the walk, right? We say this today, but sometimes again, just like them, got to kind of realize that maybe some things that we have been putting into the quote unquote walk that really are not found in the scripture. They might be traditions that got started from some elder somewhere, whether it be in the early 50s, 60s, 30s, or whenever commandment keepers or these various Israelite camps was getting started. It might be traditions that got started from there. It might go back even before then. It might have been adopted and grafted in from the very people that follow halakha, right? There are all sorts of things. It might have come in from the traditional church world, Christianity. All sorts of things can get mixed into the pot, right? And for each person, it just gets called the walk. But this is something to think about, right? So the Pharisees had a tendency to add things to and take things away from the word to make it fit with their traditions. These traditions were formed because they had their own opinions about how things should and shouldn't be done. This new set of law was called halakha, the walk or the way to walk. In doing this, they started to establish their own standard of righteousness based on their own opinions and biases. So for them, their tradition or their way of seeing a matter equaled truth and was worthy of representing the Father's word, even over the Father's word itself. With this being the case, anyone that agreed with their consensus was seen as right, and any that did not were seen as wrong, and in many cases as opponents, right? So again, the greater context of this lesson is how our opinions can keep us from being able to fellowship and have peace with one another, right? Especially over matters that are not dealing with salvation, right? There are certain cases where even Shaul said to the Corinthians and like, nah, why are y'all still having anything to do with this individual? There are certain things that you just got to stand on the Father's business, but not everything is one of those matters, right? So Luke 12, verse 1, it says, meanwhile, when the innumerable crowd of people had gathered together so that they trampled one another, he began to say to his taught ones first, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. So, something about this righteousness of the Pharisees, it got something to do with some leaven, and it's got something to do with some hypocrisy, right? Matthew 16, verse 5, it says, and his taught ones came to the other side and had forgotten to take bread. And Yahushua said to them, mind, and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, because we brought no bread. But Yahushua, aware of this, said to them, O you of little belief, why do you reason among yourselves because you brought no bread? Do you still not understand? Neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you picked up, or the 7 loaves and the 4,000 and how many large baskets you picked up. How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then they understood that he did not say to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. So it's something about their teaching and their teaching of righteousness that's off base. So the burden of the Pharisees, right? And we got our guy up there. He heavy laden with some burdens, right? So Matthew 23, verse 1. Then Yahushua spoke to the crowds and to his taught ones, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on the seat of Moses. Therefore, whatever they say to you to guard, guard and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say, and do not do. Now here's a footnote. Shem Tob's text read, he says, referring to Moses, instead of they say, referring to the Pharisees. So another one of those little details from the Hebrew version of Matthew. For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but with their finger they do not wish to move them. Right? So, of course, I had to put in the Hebrew version of Matthew just so we could get a peek at that and what they were talking about. So Hebrew Matthew words it a little bit different, and it might make a little bit more sense, right? Because we've also have heard it said, like, do what they telling you to do, but don't do what they do. And it's like, but what if they telling me to do something that's off? Do I still do it? You know what I mean? So it's like, nah, that wasn't what Mashiach was saying at all. So Hebrew Matthew puts it this way, and it might make a little bit more sense. It says, Then Yahusha spoke to the people and to his disciples, saying, Upon the seat of Moses, the Pharisees and sages sit. Now all which he says to you, keep and do. But according to their ordinances and deeds, do not do, because they say and do not. They demand and set forth great burdens, which the shoulders of men are not able to bear, but they themselves, even with their finger, are unwilling to move. So, in other words, well, they claim that they represent Moses and they claim they stand for the Torah. Whatever Moses said, do that. But anything else outside of that, nah, don't pay them no mind. Right? So the question just becomes, well, where did the burdens that the Pharisees set on other people come from?
At times, there are situations where when somebody in a position of authority feels challenged,
Mm.
according to the written law, to throw off that challenge or them having to justify whatever's being brought to light, why don't you focus on doing XYZ? I don't see you doing that.
Mm.
How all these things on top of the mouth to stop the mouth instead of them actually sitting up straight and getting it together.
Mm.
That's just something I've seen. I'm not saying that's end all be all.
Nah, all praises. So, like, absolutely. Like, we'll see they had reason why they hated Mashiach and his disciples so much, right? Like, nah, they coming and they disrupting some things, and they gonna cause the people to shift and change from doing things how we say to do them to now people gonna look at us and they gonna say, well, why would we listen to y'all when obviously the burden that they putting on the people is more than they can bear anyway? All praises.
Supposed to pay tax for this, supposed to do this, that, and the other, supposed to provide sacrifice for this, and meanwhile you just leeching the people. Because we in a position to receive. We're receiving it on behalf of the Father.
The burdens can come from a collective of like-minded people. So when other people maybe in leadership agree on the same thing, and now you've gathered people who are like-minded. You have people who are like-minded for righteousness and then like-minded for wickedness. So there is a group of whoever agreed on whatever the bias or opinion was according, and then you have leadership, and then the agreement continues, and then there you go.
All praises. All praises. Again, just keep in mind how all of these things can translate to today, right?
I would,
I would say some of those things, the traditions of man, could come from literally, like I said, traditions of man. And this puts me in my frame of like the Mishnah, you know.
We're gonna get into a lot of that today. Yeah,
Oh,
all
my
praises.
bad. I don't even be
Yeah,
stepping on your
nah,
toes.
nah, you right. You we not at all. We right on walking this step. All praises.
Yeah, but the translations, people bringing their own interpretations to a thing instead of really seeking guidance from the author,
Mm-hmm.
instead of really seeking the spirit
Mm-hmm.
and the father's, the heavenly father's intent for the words when he spoke them through whomever he spoke them through. Just taking, kind of like we have done with Christianity and all of that stuff. We definitely have taken traditions as the gospel truth
Mm-hmm.
when that's not the case at all. We haven't sought the Father's actual, like, this is what this walk is supposed to be about, like seeking the Father's actual intent, seeking the Father's intent for the words that he put out. So I think, just little arguments about stuff that was interpreted incorrectly, and then as other as Maish was saying, or the other right here was saying, somebody, instead of feeling like dealing with feeling challenged, no, putting a further burden on somebody else to kind of dispel any questions about, what it is that they're laying down. or what have you, whatever. So I think that could be like a place where a lot of that stuff comes from.
Absolutely. All praises. All praises. So, what we will see is that many of the issues that the Pharisees had with others stemmed in others doing things differently than they thought they ought to have been done according to their own opinions. So, we see this happening on many occasions between them and Mashiach and his disciples. So, these different opinions began to be added to the word of the Father, and the word of the Father started to become something that it was never meant to be, burdensome. In many cases, the same thing can occur with us today. We can add our own biases and opinions to the word, and it can cause strife, debate, and feuding between one another. All right. So Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I shall give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble in heart, and you shall find rest for your beings. For my yoke is gentle and my burden is light." First John 5:2, it says, "By this we know that we love the children of Elohim, when we love Elohim and guard his commands. For this is the love for Elohim, that we guard his commands, and his commands are not heavy, they're not burdensome. Because everyone having been born of Elohim overcomes the world." And this is the overcoming that has overcome the world, our belief. Who is the one who overcomes the world but he who believes that Yahusha is the son of Elohim? Right. So this walk of walking with the Father is not something that was designed or meant to be burdensome or grievous. Right. But you can notice how sometimes things can be certain standards or traditions or things like that can be set that can make it that. Right. So, and really, a lot of times it stems in, well, this is the way that we do it, right?
That phrase is very popular.
Very popular phrase. Absolutely. So, my way is the only way, right? So, what is a cultural bias, right? So, a cultural bias is the interpretation of situations, actions, or data based on the standards of one's own culture, right? Cultural biases are grounded in the assumptions one might have due to the culture in which they are raised, right? So when you look at the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they had their own culture, right? This is the way we do things. From washings of hands to whatever the list is, it goes on and it goes on, right? This is how we do it. And anybody that don't do it how we do it, well, yeah, you ain't doing it right, right? So Mark chapter 7, verse 1, it says, "And the Pharisees and some of the scribes assembled to him, having come from Jerusalem. And seeing one of his taught ones eat bread with defiled, that is, with unwashed hands, they found fault." So now, again, just taking a step back and looking at how these same sorts of things can happen today, right? They are automatically identifying them not doing things the way that they do things as what? This is wrong. They found fault with it, right? So it says, "For the Pharisees and all the Yahudim do not eat unless they wash their hands thoroughly, holding fast to the tradition of the elders. And coming from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions which they have received and hold fast, the washing of cups and of utensils and of copper vessels and couches." Then the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your taught ones not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands?" And he answering said to them, "Well did Isaiah prophesy concerning you hypocrites, as it has been written, this people respect me with their lips, but their heart is far from me." Now, remember those who know righteousness and whose heart is my law and all of these things. So there's something about this Torah that's supposed to be in your heart. But notice that with these, their hearts are far from the Father, right? So it says, "Forsaking the command of Elohim," now we got a problem, "you hold fast the tradition of men." And he said to them, "Well do you set aside the command of Elohim in order to guard your tradition. For Moses said, respect your father and your mother. He who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, if a man says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is korban, that is a gift, you no longer let him do any matter at all for his father or mother, nullifying the word of Elohim through your tradition, which you have handed down. And many such traditions you do. So, see that they have a pattern of this kind of behavior, right? So, have we ever thought something should or shouldn't be done a certain way because of a belief we have of the scriptures and began to judge the character of the individual we disagree with because they did not see the matter in the way that we do, right? Again, this can go down the list of calendar to, if there's an issue to be had amongst our people, the issue is had. You can find it, and you're going to find division, even so much so to the point to where sometimes you'll see where two groups that from the outside to the innocent bystander is like, y'all are the same. And then they have infighting within one another because we got the truth. Y'all don't. And it's like somewhere in there, we got this thing flipped on its head and we off, right? So just some questions to keep in mind. Was it a matter of salvation? Because a lot of times it's not, right? Like a lot of times it don't have nothing to do with the meat and potatoes of what the Father is trying to get us to do. And if we can, just like Paul said in Acts, like, well, I was just trying to get them to do these things, stop stranglings and stop the idol worship, stop the sexual immoralities. If we can just get them to stop some of these big things, well, every Shabbat, the law of Moses is taught. We can fill in the details and the smaller, the less weightier matters. We'll fill in the gaps with that. But again, notice that sometimes today, in these days, we uphold the less weightier matters and fight over everything else, right? So, is it possible that we care more about the topic than the Father himself does? And if he did not specifically speak regarding the matter, right? So sometimes, like we've been saying, sometimes some matters are inconclusive. And it's like, well, yeah, do the best you can until the Father comes and says, like, well, otherwise, right? We fight over those things. Is it possible that there are matters that are applicable to you and your situation or are more or less expedient for you than for others, right? These are all things that we have to keep in mind that, well, maybe this is something that the Father has revealed, made conclusive for you, but it might not necessarily be for every individual. Now, again, I got to preface it by saying there are some things that's just undebatables that everybody is common to man, right? Everybody know, and it's like, this ain't no mystery. But a lot of times it do be mysteries that we fight over, right? Like it's something that ain't 100% laid out, ain't 100% clear. We seeing through the glass starkly, but somebody has made it into themselves that they got the end all be all, and we fighting over that, right? So again, just stuff to keep in mind. So with regard to the Pharisees, in hindsight, this seems silly to most of us, but this is perhaps because we are looking at it in hindsight and already have a bias for who we believe is right in the scenario, right? We already know when we go into the text that Mashiach is right. So with that being said, it's easy for us to skip over and not really look at what Mashiach's issue was at this time, right? Like, because we already know the answer. We don't have to do the legwork of trying to figure out, well, what was Mashiach's problem here? Right? Like, well, it's like, no, Mashiach good, Pharisee bad. We know they evil. We know their hearts is evil. And that's just the end all be all, right? But we'll peel back some of the layers to it a little bit more today, right? So because we have already come to a conclusion of who is right and wrong in this situation going into it, we may have missed some details to the story. And we may not have fully looked into why the Pharisees believed this and why Mashiach took issue with it, right? So why did they believe some of the things that they believed? Right? Because if we don't understand that, is it possible that we can fall into some of these same patterns of thinking? What I want us to pay attention to is a process of thinking that was a pattern for the Pharisees that we can sometimes fall victim to as well. What we will see is that their opinion on this practice was something that they derived from a practice found in the scriptures. The issue is that their opinion was added to what the word said, and this opinion became the new standard of right and wrong instead of the word itself. Right. So it's also worth noting that the violation did not come from the hand washing itself. There is no law prohibiting you from washing your hands, even if you personally have found it useful for approaching the Father. Right. If you yourself say, nah, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to the Father before, like, the Father's going to honor that, I'm sure. Right. That's you and your personal thing that you saying, I'm going to go before him the best way that I can. And to me, this is me putting my best foot forward. But it does become an issue when if you see somebody else eat without washing their hands and you like sinner. Now it become now it's gonna become a problem because now the Father got to check you because you saying just like he did with Job's friends. Well, hold on now, wait a minute. I accepted you doing that. Yeah, I like that you do that, but don't go. I ain't tell him to do that. Don't go putting my name on top of that like I commanded this, right? That's when it become a problem. So the issue arose when they began to teach others this as if this was a command from the Father. This is when the line was crossed and it became a thing where they were putting their word above the Father's, right? So basically what I'm trying to get at is, and we'll see how it goes, is that this wasn't it in the wise words of the man at AutoZone. It didn't start heavy. It just gets heavy. Right? Like they didn't I honestly don't believe that the people who were at the start of this thing, their intention was I'm gonna steer as many people away from the most high as I can. Right? That wasn't what the intent was. It's just that when some of these other things got in the way, it spiraled into that. And then before you know it, you're the blind leading the blind. Like they was blind too, let's not forget. Right? So Jewish law and custom prescribe ritual hand washing in a number of situations. This practice is generally known by the Hebrew term netalat yadayim or yadayim, which literally means taking up of the hands. Right. So the Talmud used the requirement of hand washing in Leviticus 15:11. The person who is touched by one who has a discharge without rinsing his hands in water must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening as a hint for general hand washing law, using asmakta, a biblical hint rather than an explicit requirement. Right. So again, it's something that didn't start heavy, it got heavy. The intention was founded in something that they saw in Torah, but then it took what they say legs of its own, and it kind of spiraled out of control, right? So what I want us to see here is just how easy it can be for us to take something from the scriptures and extend or minimize its reach based on our opinions and experiences. We will see how more opinions were then held on top of this telephone game for various scenarios, and before they knew it, a whole tradition was being upheld based on someone's opinion of how something that was in scripture should be applied and who it should have been applied to, right? So what they based it on Leviticus 15:11, and anyone whom he who has the discharge touches without rinsing his hands in water shall wash his garments and bathe in water and be unclean till evening, right? So this was only part of the reason why they came to this conclusion that they did about washing hands. The issue is that to them, they were right on the matter, and anyone that disagreed with their point of view was wrong on the matter, right? So, out of curiosity, is washing the hands, is this a salvation issue? So now we're gonna see, but these same things are the things that they was looking to kill Mashiach for. Like in the same way, we can be like that sometimes. It can become a way or become a thing where instead of us all right, well, hey, y'all doing that over there. All praises, do the best you can. Father will sort it out on a matter that's not salvation. Again, like I said, there's some matters that is like, nah, we can't stand on that because the word clearly says this. And hey, yo, I don't know what to say about that, right? Like you gotta take that up with your maker. Like I can't stand by you on that one. But again, like how many times have we seen calendar sun up to sundown, or like we've seen so many issues stem and divisions and schisms and everything else, all based off of, well, this is the way we ought to be doing it, and it don't even be a matter of salvation or not. Like it don't be a matter of, okay, well, if that's what if that's what the Father has led you to do, then by all means, move in that thing, right? And let till He says otherwise, and that's the same for all of us, because let us not think that we stand too much, because yeah, might end up be walking and then run into a wet spot. Right now, your head leaking on the ground. So that's just the way that it can go, right? Like it's a much better approach to say, "Hey, yo, this is where we at. What the Father has showed me up to this point, we doing the best we can. We know we got to do something now." Which, when we start really looking at the Pharisees, that's what it's really boiling down to. Is when you look at the state of the people, it's like, well, we got to do something. We can't just throw this whole thing away. So then what do we do? Then they turn to this group that are scholars in this thing, and they're relying on that. All of this is all stemming and happening because the function of the priesthood is broken down. The ones who the Father said, hey, these are the ones that know. These are the experts on this thing. When you looking all throughout Torah, I don't say nothing about Pharisees. It's all no, go to the priesthood, and they going because they have been the one. Like, no, they communicate, they know. They have been raised up, and this whole family line has been taught in this thing. But when captivities and all these dispersions and things like that took place, now you just got, after, especially we all in seen Maccabees, right? They doing the best they can to hold their people together so that they not be a people no more. Like that's what's on the. So it ends up being a thing where they're all just trying to come together, and i.e. now you got people functioning as the priesthood that were not even priests, like they wasn't even the priesthood. So you got all these things happening, and again, just looking at it and seeing like we kind of are in them same shoes today. A group of individuals just trying to figure it out. To the best that we can, we just trying to figure it out. And it's like, well, we know we can't just throw that out the window because we trying to at least show the Father that we care. Like, yeah, we might not got the temple and we might not got Levites and we might not got XYZ, but we care. So we trying to uphold that, but then sometimes it can get, like I said, it can grow legs of its own and it can become a whole new thing that it wasn't never really meant to be if that's part of it is not expressed. Right? That's really the main thing is, hey, that part of it can't be neglected to be expounded on. To say, hey, yo, we're just doing the best that we can. And this is for whatever assemblies, whatever, right? Like we just doing the best that we can with what we got. And that's not to say that what we setting up right now might not be subject to change. Because if the Father come in and say, nope, and so that was okay. I winked at the ignorance, but here go a little bit more. Now walk in this, right? Then that's what we're gonna have to do, right? So like, but when you take the approach of no, this is what it is, then you think you're gonna do that when the Father says, here goes some more. You think you would do that? Like, nah, obviously you wouldn't, because that would mean, like I was saying earlier, like my image and my position. Hold on, wait a minute. Now that's, I feel like that's challenged, and it becomes a problem. That's really the pattern that they went through. So okay, so about to get into some interesting things, right? So Mishnah and all of that stuff, right? So Exodus 30, verse 17, it says, and Yahuwah spoke to Moses, saying, and you shall make a basin of bronze with a stand also of bronze for washing. And you shall put it between the tent of appointment and the slaughter place, and shall put water in it. And Aaron and his sons shall wash from it their hands and their feet when they go into the tent of appointment, or when they come near the slaughter place to attend, to burn an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. they wash with water, lest they die. And they shall wash their hands and their feet, lest they die. And it shall be a law forever to them, to him and to his seed throughout their generations. Right? Again, there is nothing wrong with the washing of these hands. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. Here we see that the command was given to Aaron and his sons before they served in the tent of meeting. We will continue to see how these things grew into a new practice and how it became the new standard of what the Father meant when he gave the command. Again, what I want us to see is how easily these things can spiral, right? So, again, these are in certain scenarios, but then you're going to start to see that it's going to be applied to scenarios where it shouldn't be, right? Not saying that it's not still can't be done. Absolutely, you can. But if an individual didn't, that's where, and you standing on that like it's the Father business, that's where it's going to be a problem. So, Shulchan Aruch, Orat Chaim, 418. This is, Talmud, Mishnah. We're going through all of that stuff, right? So, the following things require washing the hands in water after them. One who rises from bed. So, if you get up out of the bed, hands got to get washed. Goes out of the bathroom. Hands got to get washed. I mean, and I don't think any of us today disagree with that, right? Like, I think we all agree with it. You went to the bathroom or relieved yourself, wash your nasty hands, right? Like, I think we all agree with it. But the issue just becomes when we saying, you going to hell. That's where it becomes a problem, right? Or the bathhouse, or who cuts his nails, takes off his shoes, touches his feet, or washes his head. Some say, also one who goes among the dead, or touch the dead. One who cleanses his clothes of lice, has sexual intercourse, touches a louse, or touches his body with his hand. Anyone doing any of these and not washing his hands, if he is a scholar, his studies are forgotten. And if he is not a scholar, he goes out of his mind. You're going to go crazy, right? Well, that's what they said. Right, moving on to Soda 4b 6. It says the Gemara continues its discussion of washing hands. Rabbi Zarika says that Rabbi Elazar says anyone who treats the ritual of washing hands with contempt is uprooted from the world.
So we see the snowball.
Mm.
He said, and
Then he said,
he put some sauce on what he said.
didn't start heavy, it got heavy. Now, next thing you know, if you do that, it started from you gonna go, you out of your mind. You gonna lose your mind. And if you was a scholar, you gonna forget what you knew. You acting like you ain't know no better. To anybody who has contempt for this, they getting wiped out. You getting cut off from this world. And if this is what the Pharisees are believing at this time, you can see why they have so much of a problem with Mashiach and his disciples, right? So Rav Hayabar Ashi says that Rav says, he said that he said, with regard to the first water, the water used when washing one's hand before a meal, one must raise his hands upward after washing. Now you're going to tell you, not only do you got to wash, this is how you got to do it. This is how it got to be done. With regard to the last water, i.e. the water used when washing one's hands at the conclusion of the meal before reciting grace after meals, one must lower his hands downward. This distinction is also taught in Baraita. Tosefta, that's another location, Yadayim 2:2. One who washes his hands before a meal must raise his hands upward after washing, lest the water advance past the joint onto the part of the hands that he was not required to wash, becoming impure, and then return to the area he had washed, rendering his hands ritually impure. Again, for us, looking at it from the outside, it's like, boy, if you don't get your, but in them in their world, right, this make 100% sense, right? Because look at how it snowballs. That's the real thing that I'm trying to point out, right? Like, it snowballed from, okay, well, wash your hands. Well, now you're going to have another individual that's going to come along and say, well, how do I wash my hands, right? Well, how am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Because this individual is just saying, I don't want to offend the Most High. You said that this is if I don't wash my hands or if I wash my hand, like I'm gonna offend the Most High if I don't. So now the next logical question is, well, how do I do it? Because I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right, right? Same thing happens all the time today, like all the time. I've been that person asking these questions before. Well, okay, so if you saying that this is how it's supposed to, so then how do I do that then? Well, XYZ, boom, 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 and then now it becomes a whole tradition that's being upheld as Torah, but it's not, right?
This whole
Let's see this whole situation with the raise your hands up unless you put them down, and then the water that fell down onto the part you ain't had to wash, then it's gonna drip back down, so it's gonna make dirt travel. And it's gonna make you unclean and get like, and then you just get a towel and dry your hands. I mean, that could happen, but it just seemed like I said earlier, putting sauce on it to make yourself seem somewhat of something, and like was brought out again, just having folks go through all of these extra motions and loops and hoops for the sake of really trying to discourage anybody questioning, you know, what you're saying or what you're commanding. Because it does on this end of it kind of seem like, pompous. I'm just going to, it can seem a little pompous because I don't recall that being in the word. I don't recall that being in the scripts or in the Torah, I should say, about, the water not having to go down to the, and then you have to rewash. And then you got, like you said, the word of the Most High is not supposed to be grievous. He gave us the recipe for soap. He gave us the process to do it. Go wash your hands with the cleansing water and do what you're supposed to do. Wash your clothes with the cleansing water and keep it moving. Real simple, cut and dry. Just do it, And I think a lot of the issue too comes in when, people are challenged on stuff like that because, like you said, we just operating for what we know, for what have been revealed at a certain time and stuff. But then when, like was brought out, you don't want to be challenged. You don't want to be seen as less than or whatever. And rather than, and it's not even a lot of times a hit to the ego if you deal with it properly. The scriptures say, even the Most High said, let's reason together. People don't want to reason together and people don't want to come to conclusion or what have you, whatever, or discuss, okay, no, maybe the Most High revealed this to you. Maybe the Most High revealed this to the next person. And somewhere, just like we read all of these scripts and not one has everything, but another might expound on another and build off and give more revelation. It just like that. Like we are walking epistles. We are walking testimonies of the Most High. One person might have this revealed. One person might have that revealed. And instead of reasoning together so that a fuller understanding can be had, no, we want to be pompous. We want to be, oh no, I got it all together. Some stuff, like you said, is like, no, I can't budge on that because that is in black and white, and that's kind of made plain, extremely plain, And so I can't really go off of what's been revealed to me on that. But for the stuff that, number one, is not nothing to do with my soul salvation. It ain't got nothing to do with my conscience. Ain't got nothing to do with my inner workings of my mind about this malice in my heart, this mercy that I'm not showing. It got nothing to do with none of that. You know what I'm saying? About the stuff that's just very trivial. When all it could take is like a conversation, or all it could take is just some reasoning. And it's like, okay, I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. Oh, okay. So boom. No, now we at each other's necks. Now we at each other's throats. Now, if you ain't with us, you against us. If you, bro, what? It's wild.
Like the least that we can do, even if we don't necessarily agree, is come to an understanding for one another. And you might walk off and say, well, sorry, I can't budge on that one. I ain't convinced, right? But you very well, now you at least have understanding for the next individual, because 9 times out of 10, understanding that we all are all in this melting pot together, right? Most of us are just, even from the person that's still in the church world, they are people too, right? Like a lot of them is just doing the best they can with what they got. And as much as they can put the pieces together, that's what they put the pieces together. But they have sometimes have a desire to serve the Most High to the best that they can, based off of the information that they have. And a lot of times, we see our folks that claim to have been awakened will cut off the well to these people just based off of where they at that particular point in time, right? And it might very well be, hey, yo, nah, I'm sorry, can't budge on that one. No pork on my fork. I can't budge on that, right? But sometimes with some situations, you'll see where now a person is moving and operating in something and they have reason behind it. Like I keep using the calendar because that's the easy, like that's the low hanging fruit. But like, nah, if you ask every person about the calendar that they're deciding to use, they can explain why they're using it, right? Most people, like, there are pros and cons and there's reasons why, like, they have a logic or a process. I might not necessarily agree, but I can at least come to you, and now I'm not gonna look at you like, now you just trying to turn from the Most High and do your own calendar, do your own thing. Like, no, okay, I understand why you're saying that. I don't necessarily agree, but whatever the Father is you feel He's leading you in, just be faithful in that, because that's what He gonna judge anyways, and the rest of it he'll set it straight. If one of us is wrong in the matter and He want me to know it, if I'm seeking Him, He gonna make sure I find it out.
And that's the part right there.
Because literally, one plant, one water, but it's the Most High that provides the increase. That's one thing that I can say about this whole situation, this walk regarding everything is, you know, the Most High truly does provide the increase. When you have these conversations, and I know the calendar keeps coming up because it's like the most convenient kind of, readily available example. But when you have these kinds of disagreements or what have you, whatever, um, or opinions or whatever it is, but at the same time, when you leave room for the reasoning, the Father usually makes sure that everybody get it, because at the end of the day, it's not my page, it's not your page, it's His page that we're trying to be on. So the Father is going to reward our diligence and our seeking and all of that and bring us together. Like you said, He's going to work it out. But if we get to a point where it's like, no, I'm not trying to hear none of that. I'm not trying to deal with it. I'm not trying to. No, I got it. I understand. I'm doing this, and this is what it is, and blah 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 blah. Number one, it's not supposed to be burdensome. Nothing that He gave us is going to be burdensome like that. Number two, He's going to provide the increase. He brings everything full circle and all the way around and provides the understanding. If we are willing, He said, if you will, you shall be taught. Period. He ain't lied with that. He ain't told no stories, and that's not a maybe you'll be to know. He said, if you want to know, you will be taught. We have to be open to that understanding and ready to receive that teaching and not shutting down when something else is presented. Be like little children. Be ready to listen and be obedient when it's time for, like you said, what if He presents you with new information? You going to tell Him, no, I ain't doing that? No, be faithful in what He have revealed unto you until He reveals more to you. And then let's go from glory unto glory. Let's go from this level to the next level and higher, like we're supposed to, but yeah, a lot of that issue, like we're talking about with here, right? Just instead of Pharisees thinking we got it all together, know what we know and blah, 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 blah. Instead of just saying, yo, no, I'm just being faithful in what I know so far. Instead of just saying, hey, let's reason together, no, like I got it together, whatever, no.
And that seemed like the Pharisees could not and did not want to be questioned. So then you get into, it's like, okay, no, it's like they're thinking we have to come up with whatever solution this is or whatever the decision is, and then after that, don't budge. But that's not that's not necessarily the right way to deal with it. So exactly, like I think as a with leadership, you have to be open to um, knowing that there's only one that truly is knows it all. And so with that being said, okay, be open to, okay, not that you have to be deceived, stand firm in what your faith is in Yahuwah, but at the same time, someone's coming to you, pray on the information, seek out Yahuwah about it, but don't just knock them down like it's not important. And here, like with the Pharisees, it just seemed like they could not be questioned. And like you said, anyone who treats the ritual of washing hands with contempt is uprooted from the world. Like, are you saying that we're going to be destroyed? So it's like that doesn't leave any space for anyone to come and be like, hey, so can you elaborate more on this? So I'm not understanding. It just is what it is. Like, no, you have to be able to really explain why something is. If you are leading, if you are leading someone, and then be able to back it up with scripture. So yeah.
And I think that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut off anything,
And then we forget, I think also, we forget what this walk is all about. Literally, it says reproofs of correction are the way of life.
That part.
Nobody wants to be told that they're wrong. And I mean, nobody, like, in our flesh, like reality, nobody wants to be told, no, you're wrong. You're doing this wrong. We think, oh my gosh, like, because there is like real condemnation that comes with like teaching people and leading people astray. But I believe, like you said earlier, the Father will wink at our ignorance. And if we're just holding fast and holding, on and being faithful to what He have revealed to us at that time and giving what we have to give, that's what we have to give, but nobody, whether it be pride or whatever it is, nobody will be told that they're wrong, but we have to get over that.
Absolutely.
We have to absolutely get over that. And we have to literally seek the Father from moment to moment and ask Him, be willing to. And that's what I was going to say too. I think a lot of this comes, well, like calling back to the previous question that you had asked, like, where could these traditions and stuff come from? I think boiling it down, not to the bare bones of it, but just boiling it down and condensing it a little bit, could come from lack of relationship with the Father in actuality. Could come directly from not having the kind of relationship that we think we got or that we would like to put on that we have. Because if that were the case, then it might be a little easier to say, I don't know. Let me seek guidance on it. Let me do what I'm supposed to do, which is take this to the throne, take this to the Father, ask Him what He dictates, and let me get back to you. Instead of feeling like, no, I gotta do something. I gotta make sure these people no, it's not about I. It's about what I'm fit to do regarding the Father. But it's not about me. Yeah. And I just want to take a moment because on the screen here, I did put up this comment because I think a lot of us can relate to this. It was put here, it said, I used to be at one point so hard on myself about knowing certain things, and that calendar being one of them. But at the end of the day, I was led to focus on the inner work. And what was said, He will reveal what He needs to. And the other part of that is for His glory. So absolutely, like, I think there's multiple topics. Like I said, I think this calendar situation just keeps coming up because like one of the most prevalent ones, like Israel got about 1,001 calendars. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's still people that observe on Sunday. You know what I'm saying? Oh gosh, So, but I think there's multiple, not just to keep beating that horse. I think there's multiple situations quite like that, like the color of border. Like how you supposed to wear your fringes, which is easy, it's supposed to look like. Whether or not to wrap your head as a woman. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's all kinds of, whether or not chicken is clean or unclean, whether or not a turkey is part of the vulture family, what you eating. Like, there's so much There's so many topics that are like this that are not salvation related, but they will become a point of contention, needlessly, a
Mhm.
point of contention. And yeah, it just, a lot of that be dispelled by number one, like the comment says, work on the weightier, on the inner work, because that
Mhm.
is the weightier matter.
Mhm.
Everything else the Father will bring into your understanding. If he sees that you focusing on the weighty
Mhm.
stuff, well, he gonna reveal, because it happened way too many times. At least I know for me,
Mhm.
he brings certain information around. Something pop up on my news feed. It'll be a question that I asked years ago, and I'll be done forgot that I asked a
Mhm.
question to the Father or prayed about a certain situation, and then he let the information just drop out. Say he has all the information, and then he's like, "Here, go research that. Go look at this. This is what I said about that." And I'm like, "Well, doggone. Thank you, Father, because I was asking about this a while ago." He brings the increase without a shadow of a doubt. But when we're focused on the small stuff, sweating the small stuff, like how he gonna teach us, and we're not showing ourselves teachable? I'm sorry, I don't mean take the whole.
Nah, all praises. Like in essence, that's really what we get at. It's kind of like the summation of kind of what this lesson has been trying to get out is really like one is identifying, all right, well, what are our opinions, right? Is it really something that we should be standing on to be causing strife, debate with one another over to begin with, right? Then the next part of it is like, all right, so now I identify and I see that okay, this is a bias, or is this something that what's the effect of me expressing this out to another individual, and what's the impact that it's gonna have on that individual, right? Because again, looking at like Pharisees and all, like nah, these are people that really are genuinely coming, and they're in a state where they're babes, they know nothing. So now they just gonna take your word for it, right? Like well, you said it, so right. So and that's a it's a dangerous thing. It's dangerous grounds to be on, right? So Mishnah uh, Ediot 5:6 says, "Whom did they excommunicate?" Uh-oh, now we talking about folk getting put out, folks getting excommunicated, right? Eleazar, the son of Hanak, who cast doubt against the laws concerning the purifying of the hands. And when he died, the court sent, listen to this, the court sent and laid a stone on his coffin. This teaches that whoever is excommunicated and dies while under excommunication, his coffin is stoned. So not only like even his coffin is gonna get stoned. That's how serious this thing ended up becoming with them. So it's no wonder again when you're looking at Mashiach, the issues that Mashiach is having and why they're having issues with Mashiach. Right? Like it wasn't just something that was as simple as oh, washing your hands or not washing your hands. Y'all be making up stuff as long as y'all go. Like, nah, this was a really these were deep rooted issues with them. And the question is, well, why? How did it get to that point? And can we ourselves fall into that same groove today? And it's like absolutely. Like 100% absolutely. Because what is different from our situation than it was with their situation, right? If anything, it's worse for us now. Like they at least had identity of who they were. Like we have been stripped and lost all of it, and we just trying to put the pieces together. So of course it's gonna be levels of understanding. It's gonna be gaps that need to be filled. It's gonna be all of that along the way, and it's gonna take each one having a heart of compassion towards one another and being willing to put the next individual over self and how we feel about a thing to say, you know what, if this is not for the building up or the uplifting or to bring you closer to the Father, on these weightier matters, and you know what? I'm gonna hold my peace on that one. Especially if it's something that I don't really, it might not necessarily be 100% laid out and clear, right?
It's gonna take the leaders to be for the people and not for self.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Like, absolutely. So Cooling 106A2. It says when Rob Demi, now notice every time when this is coming up, what they saying. When Rabbi said, when it ain't said when Elohim said yet.
Come on.
First thing what they saying is when the teacher said. Uh, it says due to the failure to wash with the hand, wash with the first waters, they ultimately fed a Jew or Yahudi pig meat. This case involved a storekeeper who would sell different meat to his Yahudim or his Jewish and Gentile customers. When a Jew or Yahudi who came to eat with him neglected to wash before eating, the storekeeper assumed he was a Gentile and fed him pig meat.
Oh,
Right? So now, what can we take away from that though? Is this is one of those things like what we was talking about experiences, right? Like, well, if you do XYZ, it has a practical reason behind it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that okay, well, this is what the father said though. Like if they leave it at this and just say, well, whenever you go to that store over there with bruh, he sell to both sides, so make sure you let him know that nah, we don't eat no pork because I'm a Yahudi, right?
yeah.
Just leave it at that. But they're using that experience as a reason to say this is the reason why XYZ and why we uphold this. So
But in essence, that came after the whole tradition was established in the 1st place. Like the shopkeeper, and the way I'm reading it, the shopkeeper used the tradition.
he's adapted to it.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so now when someone is operating contrary to the tradition, does that make them any less? Like, just because he didn't wash his hands immediately right then,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? He's looked at like, oh, let me give you pig.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Tana Debai Eliyahu Rabbi 15:1. His students came and sat, and he taught that, and he had Mikra, written law, but no Mishnah, oral law. And Reb said to me, washing the hands is from the Torah, but was not told to us at Mount Sinai. Huh. So make it make sense, right? Which is what the man is coming to him and saying, well, I got the Torah here. I don't have no Mishnah. I don't know nothing about that, but I got the written law. I couldn't find it. So make it make sense. This is going to be his response. He says, I said, my son, there are many things that are stringent, and the verse does not have to say them explicitly. Therefore, they were given to the children of Israel, and it was said that they would distinguish you in order to give you reward. And from there, we do know that it is so. He says, and from there, do we know that it is so? When the Israelites were in the desert, Elohim said to Moses, Exodus 19:10, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow and wash their clothing and refrain from relations and make them holy with immersion. We learned that washing the hands is from the Torah, from Moses and Aaron and their children, as it says, when you enter the tent of meeting, and you should wash with water, Exodus 30, verse 20. And with regard to Israel, what it says, Leviticus 20, verse 7, and you should be holy because I am holy. From here, Rabban Gamliel ate Hulin in purity and said to his students, not to the Kohanim only was given holiness, but rather to Kohanim, Leviim, and Israelites, all of them, as it says, Leviticus 19:2. speak to the whole congregation of Israel, etc. You shall be holy. And from there, and from here, we learn that he who belittles washing the hands, it is a sign that he is evil. Mm. And about him, it is written. So now again, this conclusion of you don't do this thing, you wicked. But the man is flat out asking, well, is this in the Torah? Can you find it? And he's saying, nah, not really, but kind of sort of. Right? No, we had to trust that. Well, no, when the Father, he know how to make something clear and plain when he is something that's necessary to be made clear and plain. And otherwise, if it's some gaps that get left in there, well, I think he is understanding enough to know that there's some gaps left up in there. He'll fill them in if need be. But until then, like, nah, right? Hand washing, we gonna see that you end up being way off base. So it says, when such a one hears the words of these sanctions, Yahuwah will never forgive him. That's deep.
That's a bold statement, though, right?
It's real deep. Real deep.
And I just wanna. No, I was gonna say that
This is bringing all this stuff to my mind, though, because it's like there's situations where there have been questions about things in the law, and it have been expounded upon by the Father and from the top down brought. For example, like when a woman or when a man has no sons, but he has daughters. So should the daughter lose out on her inheritance, or or just because he don't have no son? No, that has been expounded upon. No, the daughter got just as much right to it as the son do. Period, point blank. So like that right there, we should know. We need to seek the Father on these things.
That was the key. Like, you see those scenarios where it's like we don't know, right? But what did they do? They went and saw.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they didn't just make it up on the fly. They went and they saw it. They said, okay, well, so the man is gathering these sticks. We don't know what to do about this. What do we do? Right? Went to the Father. The Father said XYZ. Boom, boom, boom. Now we got an answer. Right? So, like, in one aspect of it, one part of it is like, no, being led by his Ruach. The Ruach has a purpose and a function. Like, one part of it is walking, being led by his Ruach. Okay, so Father, let me go back like you were saying. You know what? I really don't know. Right? Here's what I'm thinking based on what I've seen, but it's inconclusive at this point. I'm not sure. Right? Let me go check back with the Father. Let me see what he says.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If he answer, all praises. And again, if you're not, you know how to open the door. If you see, you know how to make sure you find it. Like, he know how to do that. And that's just a part of trusting him. You got to trust that, but yeah. So he says, Yahuwah will not forgive him. Yahuwah blots out his name from under heaven. So we learn anyone who eats without washing their hands, it's as if he fornicated with a married woman. So again, just giving some context, when we looking at these issues that they had in their days, how deep rooted it is. This wasn't just like a fly by, like for us, it is just a fly by night. Like, it's not really it doesn't have any significance to us because we weren't raised with that tradition. Like, we automatically going into the story knowing Mashiach is right and y'all wrong, right? But when you really stop and you look at, like, no, how did they come to this conclusion? Why was it such a big deal? Then it leads us to caution, because it's like, okay, now I can kind of see how we have been victim of these things. A lot of us weren't raised up in this walk, so that means that we were under some other traditions and we was doing them blindly, right? It means that we was just doing these things based off of the same way why they doing these things is what I was taught to do, right? So then you got that aspect of it, and then you got, when you come into the walk, it's same thing likewise, and in a lot of cases, right? So all that being said, again, the question is, why are these the things that end up being the things that are causing debate and strife, right? And it all boils down to what we holding on to, standing on our opinions instead of actually seeking what the Father is saying.
Putting faith in incorrect interpretations,
Mhm.
not seeking relationship with ourselves, and not waiting for confirmation
Mhm.
from the
That's
Father
a
on
big one.
things.
That's a real big one. All praises. I'm trying to think. I'm sorry. Bear with me. I'm trying to think of how much more to go into this today. Part two.
I said, we can do part two.
All praises. Yeah, I think yeah, that's it's both, but for the sake of time, you know what I will read. I will read this, and this will be where we'll end off on this because this is a funny little story that's found within the Talmud. But again, these are extremes. Obviously, when we're looking at the Pharisees, they kind of are like an extreme case of like the train went and it just derailed and it went, and it's like, yeah, it's out for lunch. But my main goal here was just for us to look within self and say, all right, look, can we be the same way towards one another, right? Like dealing with one another in this walk, dealing with one another, even like I said, for folks that are not in this walk, that's just our people, right? Like there are quite a bit of our people that ain't woke up to know nothing, not nan nothing, right? Like, and then there are a lot of us that are allegedly woke up, but eyes still closed. So and that's in varying levels and degrees on every step of the way. So yeah, what I just wanted us to see is ultimately they didn't just get, and the Pharisees didn't just arrive at the point where they arrived at, like out of the blue, out of the middle of nowhere. Like it didn't start this way; it got this way. And how did it get this way? And what are we doing to make sure that it don't get that way with us? That's really what I'm getting
It can be tough being in such a position to lead the people, and then you don't realize when your behavior causes you to be cut off from the Father. And then when you're no longer getting a response, but you still got to give an answer, you got to draw from somewhere.
at.
And then if you're not careful, you keep drawing from somewhere else other than the Father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All praises.
That must be Saul.
I was just about to say, Shaul, King Shaul. Yeah. All praises. So Bava Metzia 59b. And this is a funny little story, but it'll give you some insight on what the real issue is, right? So it says, and this is known of the oven of Aknai. The Gemara asks, so here's the question: what is the relevance of Aknai, a snake, in this context? Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said it is characterized in that manner due to the fact that the rabbis surrounded it with their statements like this snake, which often forms a coil when at rest, and deemed it impure. The sages taught on that day when they discussed this matter. Rabbi Eliezer answered all possible answers in the world to support his opinion, but the rabbis did not accept his explanations from him. So again, what are we talking about here? One opinion versus another, right? After failing to convince the rabbis logically, Rabbi Eliezer said to them, if the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, this carob tree will prove it. The carob tree was uprooted from its place 100 cubits, and some say 400 cubits. The rabbi said to him, one does not cite halakhic proof from the carob tree. Rabbi Eliezer then said to him, if the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, the stream will prove it. The water in the stream turned backward and began flowing in the opposite direction. They said to him, one does not cite halakhic proof from a stream. So, in other words, he's getting proofs from the Father, showing no, actually his point of view is right on this. And he's saying, hey, yo, if I'm right, let the Father show you and do something out of the ordinary. And then they see the Father do something and they say, well, we don't base this walk based off of something like that, right? So Rabbi Eliezer then said to them, if the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, the walls of this study hall will prove it. The walls of the study hall leaned inward and began to fall. Rabbi Yehoshua scolded the walls and said to them, if Torah scholars are contending with each other in matters of halakha, what is the nature of your involvement in this dispute? The Gemara relates, the walls did not fall because of the deference due Rabbi Yehoshua, but they did not straighten because of the deference due Rabbi Eliezer, and they still remain leaning. Rabbi Eliezer then said to them, if the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, heaven will prove it. A divine voice emerged from heaven, from the Shamayim, and said, why are you differing with Rabbi Eliezer, as the halakha is in accordance with his opinion in every place that he expresses an opinion? Rabbi Yehoshua stood on his feet and said, it is written, it is not in heaven. Deuteronomy 30 verse 12. The Gemara asks, what is the relevance of this phrase? What you mean it's not in heaven? It's not so far off. He gonna give his explanation. What is the relevance of this phrase? It is not in heaven in this context. Rabbi Yirmeiah says, since the Torah was already given at Mount Sinai, we do not incline. Exodus 23:2. Since the majority of rabbis disagreed with Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, so the majority gonna rule, the halakha is not ruled in accordance with his opinion. So the Most High done spoke and said, no, he right. And they said, well, no, he not right. The Gemara relates, years after Rabbi Natan encountered Elijah the prophet and said to him, Elijah the prophet, what did the Holy One, blessed be he, do at that time when Rabbi Yehoshua issued his declaration? Elijah said to him, the Holy One, blessed be he, smiled and said, my children have triumphed over me. My children have triumphed over me. And after this, Rabbi Eliezer was excommunicated from the group, even though he was the one that was right. So basically what the story is saying is that in their point of view, they was always right. And they said that even though the Father showed them that they was wrong, they said, quoting some verse, Exodus 23:2, well, it's not so far off, so then we shouldn't need you to tell it to us. We got it figured out. Us rabbis, we got it figured out. And he said, you know what? According to them, the Father laughed and said, my children, y'all got me. Y'all outsmarted me on this one. I guess you're right. I guess you're right. And even though, yeah, your word over mine, it's a funny story. Now, mind you, it's not funny to them because they put this in there to show and to prove, no, the rabbis are right, even over what the Father says. We're still right. They even recorded this in their own book to teach to others. But in a sense, though, like Ak was saying, in the same way, we can't function and operate the same way, especially positions of leadership today. We can't, and that position of leadership doesn't even necessarily have to be, from the position of quote unquote more or teacher or anything like that. Sometimes us on an individual level are that source of light to just another individual, right? Like another family member just might call you when everything hit the fan and it's like, I don't know which way to turn and how to make sense of my situation. I ain't even in the walk. But I need some sound wisdom and I need some sound advice, and I know I can rely on you because you know the Father. I don't know him, but you do.
Yeah.
So sometimes it can just be that, something as simple as that. Really be mindful of your opinions and really be mindful of how you steering another individual, because it, that's a position not to be taken. Like a lot of times, sometimes we can be in the same mindset as them and just rattle off something,
I know you
but it could be off a little bit, So that's all.
Absolutely.
No, I'm told,
No, it's
told me
the
off.
same as
Yeah, I'm told me off. That's a total place to stop. Because it's still, we only about halfway through this particular lesson, so it's a little bit more.
All praises to the Most High, and it's definitely a Tob lesson, a Tob meditation, Tob discussion, righteousness of the Pharisees, dealing with our own opinions. Like, what are we actually holding on to? What are we actually operating out of? Are we operating out of obedience in actuality, or are we operating out of tradition? Is our mouth close to the Father, but our heart's far from Him? You know, and just thinking about what was just talked about, like literally this little story, and I find it funny because but it's not funny, like you said. It's not funny because they said, well, didn't you say the word was near us, so we got the word? He also said lots of stuff, but what are you choosing to hold on to? You know, and just it makes me think on like, no, he told us through Moshe he would that all men would prophesy, but because the hardest of our hearts, that's not going to be the case because we're not going to seek to him. That's not going to be the case. But he would love it if we were all conduits for his spirit. He would love it to have, as he set it up, to be a nation of rulers and Kohanim and priests of Levites, like a whole entire nation of people that are seeking him and ruling in righteousness and in justice.
Jeremiah 30 or 31, right? Like Jeremiah 31. That's his desire, his goal.
Absolutely. Like he would love that. And that would be the word is not so far from you. Why? No, because you can go directly to him. You don't necessarily have to have a conduit if we were in that kind of position heart wise. But because we're not, and so stiff necked and striving with the most high, and oh, yeah, you got no, because I'm sure he ain't said it like that. Just like he said in Isaiah, no, make the heart of this people fat. He just gave us over to what it was he was holding on to, and that's not Tove at all. So absolutely Tove lesson. Definitely some meat to chew on.
Oh, praises.
Definitely some meat to chew on, and things to consider and do the inner work. Do the work of the weightier matters instead of getting caught up on things like washing our hands and other, non-salvational issues. Did anybody else want to say anything else?
Also, wanted to emphasize, like, leading with love with the mishpachah. Like ultimately, these are again one of these weightier matters. This is what the Father is seeking, what He's desiring for us to do. If we can do that, then we put ourselves in a position for the win with one another, where we can reason with one another, and then as long as everybody is willing to seek the Father in His face on the matter, then you can't convince me that we can't come to a conclusion.
Definitely.
Like it's impossible. If He behind it, then yeah, He gonna step in and He'll let you know. Yeah, nah, but not expedient. Nope. Like yeah, but nah, leave that alone. Like now ain't the time for that, right? Like now, no. See what I'm trying to do with the people right now, and this is the direction that I'm going. Leave that alone, right? That's gonna hurt the cause more than it's gonna help it. X, Y, Z, vice versa, right? Nah, you know what? They fine. Leave them over there. Like I mean, like we said, the list goes on the things that have been sources of disputes and why we can't get it together and find unity and get on one accord with the Father. Like all the while, the adversary is laughing at us like, "Yep, see, got him. These people ain't gonna never get up." Like, yeah. So, yeah, main thing is just leading with love. Really looking at it and saying, okay, with these opinions, is this coming from a place of love or is it coming from a place elsewhere, self-serving or something else? And if we can do that, then we're gonna be way ahead of a lot of the stumbling blocks that can be put before us. So yeah. Also, now that's it. That's told me up. Yeah, all praises.
All praises. I do not have necessarily any announcements except for all praise to the Most High. We got the foundation laid for the first annual Abram Homeschoolers Convention that has come and gone. All praises unto Yahuwah. Hello, Yahuwah.
All praises.
So yeah, that foundation is laid, y'all. It's only up from here. So Most High willing, the next annual one, and this is so important. It was so important, really. Regardless of everything else that was going on, it's very important because it's about starting these new, and I hate to use the word traditions because there's so much of a connotation or stigma with the word tradition, but at the same time, like cultural things coming up out of the worldly traditions and establishing our cultural community traditions in Most High willing to the best of our abilities in righteousness. Like I said, this is not a matter of salvation or anything. No, so you're not required to come to Abram Homeschoolers Convention when it comes every year. This is not your Passover. No, but at the same time, this is coming up out of the school systems. This is learning our culture as it pertains to the scriptures, how the Father said for us to walk these things out, how to become well-rounded individuals that cling unto the truth and unto His word, and supporting one another, preferring one another, the people that are putting together curriculums, books, materials, and things like that for our children and for our community. It's like support. It's about supporting one another in doing that thing, and as opposed to sitting around looking, all upset and down. Now, why we ain't got nothing? Why we can't do anything for ourselves? And especially during times when the world is doing their thing. The world getting ready to do that, or the world just went through, Thanksgiving. Yeah, they just went through Thanksgiving. No, we're not, and we're not gonna sit around and look sad that we ain't got nothing of our own to go through. No, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come together and cling to one another and start this new cultural situation, Most High willing and righteousness, as stated, uplifting Him, teaching these babies and allowing these babies to grow up and know that no, this is what we do. This is our walk, our halakha. No, it's not a salvation issue, but it's something that I could look forward to that's going to whet my appetite to further delve into this walk, into this truth, into this scripture in the Most High's ways. Give them something to look forward to so that they don't feel like they're missing out on anything. And that's what it's about. Keeping the children from feeling like they're missing out on anything. So all praises to the Most High. We are very grateful and very glad that the foundation is laid. The first one is out the way. First annual Abram Homeschoolers Convention has came and gone. If you missed it, feel sorry for you. Not really. No, I'm just kidding. No, but if you missed it, most high willing, there will be more. You know, we're working the kinks out. There will be more to come, and so yeah, just keep a will pictures, videos, all of that stuff. We're gonna try to get that shared and get some stuff put together, like a recap of everything that happened, and share that information so that you can see, what's going on, because it was a very small and intimate event, and it was really, really, aside from, like I said, everything else, it was nice. It was nice. A lot of people enjoyed what happened and everything. And so, and I don't think a lot of people knew about it, but you know what? We're going to get that information out there so that we can have more people to show up who would love to be a part of that kind of thing. So we got a whole year to plan for the next one, y'all. So y'all plan to come to the next Abram homeschool. I can't call it the first one anymore. So the next Abram homeschoolers convention. Everybody out there that's listening, plan to come to next year's Abram homeschool convention. All right. If you have children, plan on, allowing them to show up, allowing them to display their talents, their skills, their abilities. If you have a business that's geared towards our community, especially towards education, whether it be in cultural studies, whether it be in Torah, whether it be in academics, whether it be in fine arts, whatever it is, information, whatever you have, let's prepare and plan to support these kinds of endeavors for one another. We got a whole another year to plan it, and I ain't waiting. I'm getting started now. So all praises to the Most High. Other than that, that's it. We definitely hope this lesson was edifying, as we hope all the other ones have been edifying to you. If you have heard it, if you have joined us live, we thank you for joining us. If you listen to us on the replay and you come back and listen to it later on, welcome. Hope you're doing well. Shalom to you and your family. We hope this lesson has been edifying to you. We hope you listen to it more than once. Um, and with that being said, may the Most High keep us. May the Most High hear us in our time of distress. May He make us exponentially more than we are this day. And may that be for our toe and not for our destruction. And with that, Shabbat Shalom, y'all.